Unlock the door to mystery with one very short story. The micro podcast filled with morally complex characters, twists you won't predict, and endings you won't forget. Every episode is a brief, intense journey, perfect for listeners who crave mystery, intrigue, and stories that leave you thinking long after the tale ends. Today's episode begins now. Today's episode, Bad in Bed, will begin after this special message. A man wakes in a sterile hotel room, his past scrubbed clean, his identity fractured. On his wrist, a barcode. In his hand, a letter written in his own handwriting, warning him not to investigate the echoes of a life he's forbidden to remember. His name is Silas, or maybe it isn't. Each assignment erases more of who he was. Each pill he swallows keeps him obedient. But when fragments of love, loss, and betrayal begin to surface, Silas discovers a truth more dangerous than any target he's ever been sent to kill. Someone wants his memory buried. Someone else wants it restored. And every hour he hesitates, he edges closer to becoming his own executioner. The Lethean by J.L. Stroud Jr. is a psychological thriller, laced with rain-slicked streets, haunting echoes of the past, and a protagonist who may be both assassin and victim, hunter and hunted. For readers who love the paranoia of Robert Ludlum, the atmosphere of Philip K. Dick, and the relentless pacing of Lee Child, this is a mystery that asks one impossible question. If you can't trust your own mind, who can you trust? Download the ebook, The Lethean, and other books by J.L. Stroud Jr. at jlstroudjr.com. Link in the podcast description. And now today's episode, Bad in Bed. The fluorescent lights of the police station hummed, each buzz a tiny drill boring into Nathan's skull. The world, which had been a frantic, prayer-filled blur for days, had snapped into a horrifyingly sharp focus. Across the table, Detective Miller slid a folder toward him. It was thin. Too thin for a kidnapping case. "We found her, Nathan," Miller said, his voice flat, devoid of the triumph Nathan had expected. Or rather, we found out where she's been. Nathan's heart, a leaden weight in his chest, didn't even flutter. He'd been picturing a rescue, a tearful reunion. Not this, not a sterile interrogation room. The two women she described, they don't exist, Miller continued. We found DNA on her clothes from the scene. It belongs to a Dylan McCarthy, an ex from high school. Dylan. The name was a half-forgotten ghost, a footnote in the story of their marriage. Miller explained that when confronted with a warrant and the DNA match, Dylan's smug arrogance had crumbled. Faced with a potential kidnapping charge, he'd given up Ava in a heartbeat, detailing their sordid, week-long affair and the pathetic, staged abduction. The bruises were self-inflicted, the restraints a prop. It was all a lie, a desperate play for attention from a woman terrified of turning 40. He'll be charged with filing a false report. Your wife will be charged with that and conspiracy and... Miller paused, studying Nathan's face for a moment. Do you know her current whereabouts? Nathan just stared ahead, looking at nothing and everything. We'll need a statement from you, Nathan drove home on autopilot, the detective's words echoing in the silent truck. He was a man who built his life on the bedrock of stability, a pillar in their small town. His world was one of hard work, honesty, and predictable rhythms. That world had just been detonated. The radio was on. He didn't remember turning it on, but there it was, two voices cutting through the fog in his brain. "So, let me get this straight," one of the hosts was saying, his voice dripping with mock disbelief. "This woman fakes her own kidnapping, complete with bruises and restraints, just so she can hook up with her high school boyfriend." "For a week!" the other host chimed in, laughing. "A whole week!" And she blamed it on two random Mexican women. I mean, the creativity alone. "But here's the real question," the first host interrupted, his tone shifting to exaggerated seriousness. "What was going on at home that made her go through all that trouble? I'm just saying, the husband must have been really bad in bed." They both erupted into laughter, the sound sharp and cruel, bouncing around the cab of the truck like shrapnel. "I mean, think about it," the second host continued, barely able to get the words out between chuckles. "You don't stage a kidnapping for good sex. You stage a kidnapping to escape. Bad sex." More laughter. Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The voices were distant, muffled, like they were coming from underwater. His brain was fogged up, thick and heavy, and he could barely process the words. But he understood enough. His life, his marriage, his humiliation. It was all a joke to them. A punchline. Entertainment for people stuck in traffic. He reached over and turned the radio off. The silence that followed was worse. He walked into the house they had built together, and it felt like a stranger's home. On the television, a local reporter was already telling the story with breathless excitement. Ava's face splashed across the screen next to a smirking photo of Dylan. The town's sympathy had curdled into pity and morbid curiosity. He was no longer the worried husband. He was the fool. Then he saw it. A packed suitcase by the door. She had been planning to run. Not to Dylan, who had already cast her aside to save himself, but away from the ruins of the life she had torched. The sight of it broke something deep inside him. He heard the creak of floorboards upstairs. She was still here, hiding in their bedroom like a child caught in a lie. The grief he'd felt for her disappearance was nothing compared to this vast, empty chasm of betrayal. His perfect life, his stable marriage, his dependable wife. It was all a fabrication. If the foundation was a lie, what was the point of the house? He didn't call out to her. He didn't go upstairs. He simply turned and walked out the door, leaving it open behind him. That evening, he didn't want sorrow. He wanted oblivion. He drove past his usual turn, past the familiar landmarks of his life, the church, restaurants he frequented, a bowling alley, and headed to a part of town he'd only ever heard about. Booty Baby was a strip club, its neon sign bleeding into the rain-slicked street. He walked in, turned down lap dances, and instead drank whiskey until the burn in his throat was the only thing he could feel, a welcome fire against the encroaching numbness. It wasn't a drowning of sorrows, it was a baptism by fire, a deliberate nihilistic act of self-destruction. Hours later, he stumbled out into the night, the alcohol roaring in his ears, and got into his truck. He wasn't driving home, he was just driving, the accelerator pressed to the floor, chasing the end of the road. Upstairs, Eva had heard the front door slam. She'd watched from the bedroom window as Nathan's truck pulled away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. This was her chance. She grabbed the suitcase and ran, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her car keys. She had to leave. Now, before he came back. Before the neighbors started gathering, before the shame became unbearable, but she remained, locked in shame and revulsion at what she had done. What possessed her to do what she had done? After a long ponderance of it all, she was sure Nathan had driven her to it. Nathan, the saint, Mr. Dependable, always reliable, eternally boring. Protection and provision were important, but they never brought the tingles to the spot between her legs. Isn't that why she reconnected with Dylan? Dylan, the high school superstar, whose looks only improved with time, ex-military, gym trainer, and part-time stuntman. How cool is that? He was the danger, the excitement that made Eva feel every bit the damsel a hero like him could rescue. If Nathan had been a better man, a more dangerous man, Eva never would have been looking for Dylan. It's all Nathan's fault. The police came by shortly after Nathan left, and Eva had been too terrified to leave since. But after so many hours, fear turned into boredom, and it was time to go. Glancing out the window in all directions, Eva built up her nerve enough to escape. She had money, enough to last a few months. Maybe by then she would have figured something out. No way Dylan would rescue her now. He was the best sex she ever had, but that's where the connection ended. Only a saint, someone dependable, reliable, and eternally boring could help her now, and she knew that option was no longer available. Eva pulled out of the driveway fast, her tires squealing on the pavement. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get out of the neighborhood, out of town, away from everyone and everything, all the while trying to escape herself. As she drove, tears blurred her vision, but not enough to hide a familiar truck barreling her way. "Nathan?" she said to herself. Nathan saw the headlights a second before impact, a blinding flash in the darkness. The world became a symphony of screeching tires and shattering glass. Then, silence. Nathan woke up to the smell of gasoline and the approaching wail of sirens. He burped, and the smell of gin on his breath made him wince in disgust. What had he done? Through the spiderweb cracks of his windshield, he saw the other car, his wife's car, a crumpled mirror of his truck. And in the driver's seat, he saw her. Eva. Her blonde hair was a mess, her beautiful eyes wide with a terror that would never fade. She had been fleeing her shame, and had driven straight into his rage. Or maybe he smashed right into her. He was not yet sober enough to discern the difference. Either way, Nathan just sat there and stared at her, trying to figure out if he cared enough to try to help her, or if he hated her enough to watch her die. Before long, the police arrived and quickly summed up that it was no accident. They saw a publicly humiliated husband, reeking of alcohol, and a wife who had just destroyed his life. They saw motive and opportunity. They saw a cold, calculated act of revenge. Nathan argued. No one listened. As they pulled him from the wreckage and cuffed his hands behind his back, the flashing red and blue lights painting the scene in a grotesque tableau, Nathan finally understood. He had built his life on a foundation of stone, but he had built it on a fault line. And when the earth finally gave way, the fall was absolute. Thanks for listening to one very short story. If today's story hooked you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us grow and keeps the suspense coming your way. Want to dive deeper? Check out the podcast description to learn more about the show and explore special offers from our sponsor. Until next time, Keep dodging bullets and stay safe in the shadows.